Hey everyone, welcome to a second episode of the Entrepreneurs Podcast. And you know my deal is I'm not going to say the excited word, but I am amazed and so jazzed to have my very, very good buddy, Rosey Koberlein, otherwise known as Rosey K. Yeah. And we were just having so much fun just talking about our past. And we think it's been 28 years since we've known each other. Can you believe it?
We were both very young.
Well, I know naive for me, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. We were together on that one.
I want you to be the one to tell a little bit of background, first of all, about you. And then we'll roll up into a fun story hey, how did this journey start with us? But tell me about you, Rosey K. Tell my listeners about you.
Well, okay. So I'll give you the cliff notes of Rosey K. Born and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania. Got a bachelor's degree in accounting, which was kind of a disappointment for me at the time because what I really wanted to be was an educator and a phys ed coach. So accounting was a long ways away because I had a guidance counselor tell all the colleges I applied for that I wasn't college material. So that's kind of how I got started there. Anyway, I worked in the public sector for the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County for a very, very long period of time, running very large departments for the government. Got moved out to California, which is where I started in my real estate career as an agent in the Bay Area. And when I turned 40, I decided to take 2 years off and I traveled for 2 years and went to very weird places like Nepal and India and all kinds of fun things that you don't get to do at this age. And somehow on that trip, I ended up here in Tucson, Arizona. And I realized I got to make a decision of where do I want to live, and the Bay Area I love, but it's very expensive. And so I decided to come here to Southern Arizona, Tucson, and I got my real estate license and started in the real estate business in 1991, March of 91. And then, 1990. And then became a branch manager. And that's how I met Kylie, as she was known at the time, Roberts. I thought, oh my gosh, if I could make a realtor out of her, this is going to be amazing. And she did. She was a great realtor and then kind of grew up and moved on to bigger and better things. But we've always kept our friendship and our relationships and our dreams of doing businesses and owning properties together, and we've stayed connected, and I'm grateful for that.
That's a great story. And now your current position with Long Now, tell us about that.
So I'm the CEO of a company in Southern Arizona called Long Realty Company. I've been the CEO for the last 16 years. I did the math this morning. We'll do just shy of 9,500 transactions this year. I have 1,000 agents here. I have a mortgage company, a title company, an insurance company, and we're the biggest company in Southern Arizona and probably the fourth largest in the state. We have offices that start as far north as Flagstaff and Sedona, and we go down into the Mexico border.
This is so amazing because I was thinking of the day that you got your promotion.
Yeah.
And first of all, a very funny story. I don't know if you remember that back in the old office, the manager that was there at that time. I didn't like my first time there. I was just like, I was having a hard time connecting with people, right? And I have to connect. I have to connect, or I just can't flourish. I can't, my energy just like goes out, right?
Right.
And I was on my way out. I was like, I don't think this office is for me. Maybe this company's not for me. I don't know. Maybe I chose the wrong one, but nobody knows me yet. I can just go out the back door and like, it'll be all right. You caught me and you were like, Kylie, I haven't got a chance to meet you yet. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this woman. This is why I got to stay. And I did. I stayed. And then we moved to the other offices, and God forbid, I mean, we've had so many amazing events. Long Realty is so big on the charity aspect, the community outreach. It's super big on my heart as far as community outreach. So, of course, I jumped in and we did a lot of fun things to for the community outreach for Long Realty in Tucson. And so it just sang to my heart, and there's never a day that I don't go by that I don't think about like being at Long Realty and the offices. And I still get to talk to the agents and I love them. I want to thank my sponsor, Monica Christian, your commercial expert from Farmers Steel Agency. So we were just talking about community and giving back. And Rosey K, you were saying, just give me the number that Long Realty has given back to the community.
It's just now over $3 million. I mean, we take a very clear responsibility to giving back to the community, and it's something we feel very strong about. And it's totally run by our agents. The agents decide who gets the money. In fact, if I want to give money to a charity organization through the foundation, I have to apply. They love saying no to me, so.
Who could ever say no to you?
It happens. It happens.
That's amazing. I'm really, really happy to hear that. I think a couple of things I'd like to ask you about is, from my perspective as an investor, because like I grew up in a family, as you know, like my dad would have rented out the doghouse because that's just, you had rentals. That's what you did. You subsidized your income and you had a rental, right? So as an agent, I was super passionate about, investment real estate and multifamily dwelling. And so I was really thrilled to be able to talk to you about that, because I know you own apartments. I've owned apartments. I've owned rental property. I still do. And I want our listeners to know that whether you're a newbie investor or an experienced investor, I kind of want to talk a little bit about that from like a personal standpoint from yours. So just like, give me what you feel, how you feel about it.
Well, I really come from the belief that the first piece of property, an individual, whether you're a man or a woman, but you should buy, is a piece of income property. Mm-hmm. Do not buy your family home the first time out, because if you bought just a simple duplex and you lived in one side and you rented out the other side, it is instantaneously a way to expose yourself to what it's like to have a tenant relationship. It exposes you to the legal requirements. It exposes you financially. It's the very first place that you can start to build wealth. And that's critically important. I can't tell you how many young folks I have said, no, don't buy the 3-bedroom, 2-bath house right now. Find yourself a really nice little duplex and start there, and then build from there. Coming from a position of being a woman where I was totally dependent upon myself to create a sense of wealth and cash flow and safety net, and coming from an attitude of not wanting to be dependent upon anybody. So there's both a sense of strength that's a motivator, but also a sense of fear that's a motivator. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that using real estate and having that fixed property that you can go to and see and know that this is part of your being is really very, very wonderful. For me, it's a much more tangible investment than investing in stock, even though I have stock portfolio, of course. But it's what I believe is the solid foundation that I can always fall back on. I have a couple rules about kind of properties I would buy, and when I've broken those rules, it has always turned into being a mistake. Always. And the first rule is, you never buy something in an area of town that you would never feel comfortable going to. Mm-hmm. You have to feel safe, you have to feel at ease, you have to feel good about the property. In Southern Arizona, fortunately, everything cash flows, mm-hmm. Or not everything, but most things will cash flow very, very easily. Where I came from in California, and I had investment property there, cash flow was like, that was great. You used it for tax write-offs. So it's a tax shelter in terms of being able to impact your adjusted gross income and that kind of stuff. So to me, it's a major way of creating wealth. And now that I'm older and looking at do I liquidate? Do I sell property? What do I do? That mm-hmm. becomes a part of a bigger decision, and it's amazing. The options and the opportunities that I have in terms of either liquidating that and adding it to a very, very safe, modest, conservative, or do I leverage it and go into something mm-hmm. entirely different? That I grew up in my 30s and 40s being concerned about retirement, and I'm not.
I think that's so smart, Rosey K. It's like, again, I grew up where my father was self-made, and we had rentals. It just was the natural thing for me. So when I talk to people and with my kids, it's like, listen, you're not going to buy the house, like go get a duplex. There's never a time where you're not going to be able to buy an income producing property. When you're buying a first time home, buy it now, live in it for a few years, figure it out, really get a gist of, again, like you said, how is it to be a landlord? You can always move in a couple years, right, and then go and do what you want to do, or continue building your properties the way you are. Mm-hmm. Even as an agent, I want to talk a little bit about like the appetite of investors. Like, for example, when I say that, Rosey, I mean, when I was talking to investors, like let's use a fireman. That's a really good example because they're great for income producing property. They've got a lot of time on their hands, and they usually have, side jobs where they're fixing up the things on their own. But say, for example, a doctor versus a fireman. You got A, B, and C properties, and not to confuse some of the early and beginner listeners, but it's like, what's your appetite as to the property that you buy? Like you said, your number one rule is, I'm not going to buy where I don't feel comfortable going. So like, just so that people like don't get overwhelmed, like what would be a really good rule as to, hey, this would be a good property for you to buy, as in beginning, who could start? Because I'm very passionate about how to help those first timers get their first property.
Right. Well, you're comparing almost two different sides of the continuum. The fireman with the doctor. The fireman having a lot of time on their hands, and they're typically, folks who can repair things and that kind of stuff. A doctor, quite honestly, probably doesn't have much time on their hands, and they certainly don't want to necessarily get their hands messed up. So what would be involved there then is to either maybe that doctor should be looking at commercial property that is, triple net. And the tenant has to take care of all the repairs themselves and that kind of stuff. Or, do they go into a partnership with somebody who can, take care of those repairs or whatever? Or, is there enough cash flow in the subject property where you can get a property manager? Now, right now I have about 24 units. And I have a property manager on 11 of them. And quite honestly, I have to manage the property manager. So, and it's not because I'm a micromanager. I'm not,
Yep.
not at all.
I know that.
But, you have to really stay on top of things. I've got a property manager who, the last thing on her mind is increasing rents. Well, that's because it makes her life easy.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is that if you don't keep your rent rolls current at today's rate, then the value of your property has gone down, even though it could be in fabulous condition because, people buy apartment units based on a cap rate. And that's a big deal. So you have to really, really be smart about it. But, should a doctor be buying investment property? Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
I just always liked when I was talking to him and educating him, and it's like, okay, great. Then you just, you need a property manager. Yes, you can actually manage your own. So there's so many ways of doing it and not being afraid of like, what's the best level for you. Yeah. So that's awesome.
I think, if any of your listeners are, in that very, very beginning stage of, how do I go about doing this? What can I do? I would say probably the books, I've read them all, that were very, very important to me is Robert Kiyosaki's books of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
One of my favorites.
I mean, I give it to my nieces and nephews when they're when they graduate from high school. It's like, okay, here, read this.
Yeah, I know. Before we wrap up this last little segment, it's like this. Remember, sorry, son, I'm going to mention you on my podcast, Culty. Like, okay, you asked to borrow more money? Great. You're going to read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then we're going to talk about it. And we'll see if mom's going to loan you money. That's awesome, Rosey.
This is Aaron from Elevate Co-working, and we're happy to be hosting not only the Entrepreneurs Hangout physical sessions, but also the Entrepreneurs Hangout podcast. Elevate Co-working Community is a membership and subscription-based co-working space in downtown Culpeper, located right on Davis Street, as well as an awesome community to be a part of.
Rosey K, speaking of books that we like to read, I know, of course, one of our favorites is The Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I want you to say, what was the other one? Because we were reading them both at the same time.
The 4-Hour Workweek.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That really, first of all, I almost felt guilty reading that book. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me if I only work 4 hours a week? Like God's going to punish me, But what it does is it really reinforces focusing your actions and being purposeful and intentional and following up and doing, not just thinking and dreaming and talking about it. Go do it,
And it's like, I think also just learning how to be a little more productive. Now, of course, he's wrote so many more books and he's gone so far, even in such a philosophical, mental way. But I think that keeping yourself fed with positive, inspirational, leadership books, reading them. I have to listen to everything because I just won't take the time to sit and flip through a book. But I've got Audible and I love it. And I'm always looking at one book a month, and that's always great to hear. So one thing I thought was quite interesting, which is, when you, I've never had a real job, as you know, like I call it a real job, like 9 to 5, clock in, and then I get paid by somebody. I've always been, I got to make it, right? One way or the other. And as a real estate agent, I think that there is so many ways to have some niches. And if you were going to give a new agent, or maybe not so new, but somebody that wanted to get into, like, all right, I think I'd like to be able to get into the investor market, what would you suggest?
I would say you have to start, and you start small. You really, you don't go for the 8 units or 11 units or whatever. You start small. I would suggest a simple duplex is the way to begin. I would also, I would recommend that you figure out how to do this on your own too, and not necessarily, get a partnership going, because that initial piece of property is a test for yourself, and that's enough. Versus if you go into a partnership with someone, then the partnership can kind of maybe put a cloud over the whole situation in a positive way or a negative way. So if you just start with a simple little duplex, that I think gives you a really enough experience. Or a simple little home in a subdivision where that folks are going to always want to rent and has a good turnover. I would do that too. I would suggest. But the way realtors create wealth is either one of two ways. You're either going to do 75 to 100 transactions a year and figure out how to do that with yourself or an assistant, or you're going to do your 20, 25 transactions a year and invest. And you invest in, and I got to tell you, it's the investment piece that will build your long-term wealth. Agreed.
I've always had rentals, and as a real estate agent, I find that I think there's a niche out there, which is actually having something that I'm going to use as Airbnb and or VRBO, which is because I'll tell you why. The property that I had at one time, I would always get to ask, hey, Rosey K, what brings you to town, right? By far, I've actually sold, 3 to 5 homes right off the top of my head to we're here because we're checking out Tucson's property to live. Well, hello, I'm an agent. And it's like, it just makes it's so smart because you've got that rental income and you've also got that lead magnet. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you, talk about you at the beginning, you talked about the freedom. And I want to say, in your words, as an investor, what does property and being an investor, landlord, what is that? How does that equate to the freedom that you have?
Well, what it does is that once you create a cash flow situation, after you have your reserves and you've got your taxes covered, and and you get to the beauty that your tenants have actually paid your mortgage off, but you haven't paid the mortgage off. So eventually you end up having property where you have no debt on it other than repairs and taxes and insurance and that kind of stuff. That is what creates the freedom, is getting that property paid off. Because then what you're looking at is any kind of retirement funds, Social Security or whatever, and cash flow from your rental properties. And, we haven't even talked about it, and I don't want to talk about it because I'm not a tax expert.
Right.
But the taxes, income from rental properties is treated significantly different and doesn't impact your income tax ratios as much as salaries and that kind of stuff. So I'm entering into that soon to be retirement era, and I've got a lot of freedom in terms of being able to do what I want. And at the same time, you also have a responsibility of a job in terms of having to take care of the properties too, and make sure that you have relationships with repairmen. Believe me, I do not go out and repair sinks and drips and crap. And that's part of it. That is part of it. You get phone calls on the weekend of, my toilet's plugged up. Oh, okay. Did your kid put another stuffed animal down the toilet?
No, come on, that can happen.
That won't happen. It's like, oh God. So there is that. There is that.
Yeah, but you know what? That we go back to your appetite for what it is. And perhaps, again, let's say, and use this as an example where you're on the fire department, you've got that time, great. But you're a doctor, well, then you're going to actually hire it out. Yeah. And, but either which way, you've got your money always is working for you.
Yeah.
And I get it. Diversify. So Rosey, I want to ask you something our listeners and people might not know about you. Give me something that can just be out there. I know I caught you off guard, but I think this is going to be fun.
Very few people know this about me. So here we go. When I took that 2 years off and I went to Nepal, and I was going to India for 2 months. And while I was in India, martial law came out. So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to go to Nepal. I thought, well, okay, if I'm in Nepal, I want to go trekking. So I went to this travel agency and said, I'd like to go trekking. And so in Nepal, in Kathmandu, you can rent anything. You rent pants and coats and jackets and boots and shoes and blah, 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 blah. It's very inexpensive. And so they flew me to this little village, and if I had known where this plane was going to land, I would have never gone. Anyway, I then hired a Sherpa who only request I had was that they speak English, and they hooked me up with this teenage girl who could only say many, many ups and many, many downs. Long story short, I got up to 14,500 feet, and I was staying at a Tibetan Buddhist monk retreat, and very, 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 very cold. And as I was falling asleep, I got altitude sickness, and I thought that I had the sensation that my whole entire body was going down this dark tube. And I said, I was sleeping in this dormitory area, and I said, okay, guys, this is what I'm experiencing. And this guide, who wasn't my guide, he was another person's guide, said, well, if you're awake in the morning, we got to get you down because you have altitude sickness. So I actually fell asleep that night knowing I was dying. And so I said all my goodbyes and asking for forgiveness.
Oh no, my goodness.
So I figured since I was able to walk down the next morning, there's clearly some sort of reason for me to be here. So.
That was smart for the guides. If you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, if you wake up. It's a total conditional statement. If you wake up.
I know, that's a tearjerker, Rosey K. Wow.
I never told you that.
I know.
I told you that many people know that.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I knew about like some fabulous, VW bus excursions in Mexico, but I never, and I knew that you went to Kathmandu, but I did not know about the altitude sickness.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So show me your mug. We got to give our little hoorah to Arizona. U of A. And you also, one thing you could have said, which is you're a big basketball fan.
Yes, I am a very big college basketball fan.
Yes.
And I totally am missing the women's basketball team this year. They haven't been able to play because of COVID. And we have last year we had a damn good women's basketball team here at the U. But anyway, things have changed.
That's going to be, that's awesome. Rosey K, give us a quote that you're passionate about before we wrap up.
Well, I think I have two. And so one is with Winston Churchill, which is never, never, never give up. And the second is trust the process. Trust that whatever you're doing, it's going to turn out okay.
I love it. I love it. You are one of my closest, dearest friends. And I am so, so thrilled to have you as my guest. I feel like I've gotten some
feelings are mutual.
I think that this has just been so amazing. I'm honored to have 30 minutes of your time.
Back at you, girl.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye, Rosey K.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. You guys, thanks so much for listening. I hope that this podcast has brought value to your ears. I really am excited to have you as listeners. I can't do this without you. Thanks so much. Bye. A word from our sponsors, JG Designs.
We are JG Design, the proud producers of Entrepreneurs Hangout with Kylie Dahl. We are a company that specializes in video and audio production that will elevate your business and add value to your brand. Find us at jgdesignonline.com for more information.